Hello hockey fans, and welcome back to another episode of Draft Day Disaster, the series where we look back at a previous NHL entry draft, but instead of ranking the most successful NHL players, we select the worst first round possible. In today's episode, we are going to be taking a look at a draft class soon to be celebrating its 20th anniversary, as we turn the 2000 NHL entry draft into a draft day disaster. For those of you who have either never watched this series before, have forgotten how this all works, or never understood it to begin with, I shall be redrafting the first round of the 2000 NHL entry draft using players selected in the first two rounds of the actual draft who went on to have the shortest, the most disappointing, or completely non-existent careers in the NHL. Instead of starting with the first overall pick and counting up like the real draft does, we shall begin with the 30th overall pick, where the best player of this bad bunch shall be selected, and count down until we reach the all-important first overall pick and the worst player on this list. So without further ado, let's turn the 2000 NHL entry draft into a draft day disaster. With the 30th overall pick in the draft and the first pick of this list, instead of actually drafting Jeff Taff, the St. Louis Blues select VLADIMIR NEDOROST. Originally drafted 14th overall by the Colorado Avalanche, NEDOROST took to the ice in 99 NHL games over 3 seasons, split between the Avalanche and the Florida Panthers, where he scored 20 points for his efforts. After leaving the league behind at the beginning of the 04-05 season, the Czech forward spent a year in his native Czech league, didn't play at all in 05-06, before resuming play for another 4 seasons back home. NEDOROST then joined the Russian KHL for the 10-11 season, and spent 7 years in the league with several different teams, before returning home to the Czech league for another couple of years, last playing during the 18-19 season for HC Pilsen and scoring 9 points in 29 games. When the best player on your list didn't even reach 100 NHL games played, you know your draft was pretty bad. Buckle up folks, it's gonna be a bumpy ride. With the 29th choice in the draft, instead of actually picking Nicholas Kronwall, the Detroit Red Wings draft Pavel Vorobyov. Originally selected 11th overall by the Chicago Blackhawks, Vorobyov suited up in 57 NHL games over 2 seasons, all with the Blackhawks, and scored 25 points in the process. After leaving the league in 05-06, the Kazakhstan forward spent the next decade playing in a variety of leagues in Russia, spent 2 seasons in the British Elite Ice Hockey League with the Edinburgh Capitals, rest in peace lads, before taking his talents to Romania for the 18-19 season. Vorobyov spent the recent 19-20 season with Giurgioi HK and scored 51 points in 52 total games, so he continues to be a productive player in Europe's lesser-known leagues. Hey, at least he's still playing. Not everyone on this list can say the same. With the 28th selection in the draft, instead of actually choosing Justin Williams, the Philadelphia Flyers pick Mikhail Yakubov. Originally drafted 10th overall by the Chicago Blackhawks, another Chicago first-round pick, great job Blackhawks. Yakubov played in 53 NHL games over 3 seasons, split between the Blackhawks and the Florida Panthers, and scored 12 points for his efforts. Following his final stint in the league in 05-06, Yakubov took his talents back home to Russia and spent the next decade playing in both the Russian Super League and the KHL. The Russian forward last played for HC Sochi of the KHL during the 15-16 season, scored a single point in 30 games, before hanging up his skates and taking his talents behind the bench in order to serve as an assistant coach for the USPHL's Chicago Cougars during the 17-18 season. Looking at a 20-year-old draft sure does give a lot of variety as to what all the players are up to now, doesn't it folks? With the 27th pick in the draft, instead of actually selecting Martin Samuelsson, the Boston Bruins draft Alexei Smirnov. Originally chosen 12th overall by the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim, the good old days, Smirnov took to the ice in 52 NHL games, all with the Ducks, and scored just 6 points. After his final stint in Anaheim during 03-04, Smirnov spent a year in the AHL, returned home to Russia for a year, went back to North America in order to play a season in the ECHL before returning home for good in 07-08, where he spent the next 7 seasons playing for a variety of teams in a variety of leagues in Russia. After spending most of the 13-14 season in Kazakhstan, the Russian forward joined Shakhtar Soligorsk of the Belarus League for the 14-15 season, and scored 14 points in 38 games, before calling it a day and retiring at the end of the year. We're not even 5 picks into this draft, and we've already seen 4 players selected in the top 15 of the actual draft who have only played 50 to 100 NHL games each. Damn, this draft was pretty awful, wasn't it, folks? With the 26th choice in the draft, instead of actually drafting Brian Sotheby, the Washington Capitals select Ivan HUML. Originally picked 59th overall by the Boston Bruins, HUML suited up in 49 NHL games over 3 seasons, all with the Bruins, and scored 18 points. After leaving North America at the conclusion of the 03-04 season, HUML spent 2 years in the Czech League, a season and a half in the Finnish Liga, a season and a half in the Swedish Hockey League, before returning to the Czech League for the next 3.5 seasons. The Czech forward then rejoined the Finnish Liga late in the 10-11 season, and spent the next 5.5 years with Karpat, before returning to the Czech League for a 3rd time in 16-17. HUML did make a brief appearance with HC Ryusty of the Czech 3rd Tier League during the past 1920 season and scored 3 points in 5 games, but left the team for personal reasons and retired from playing professional hockey soon after. I guess 3rd time's the charm for the Czech League. With the 25th selection in the draft, instead of actually picking Steve Ott, the Dallas Stars draft Shane Endicott. Originally chosen 52nd overall by the Pittsburgh Penguins, Endicott played in 45 NHL games over 2 seasons, all with the Penguins, and scored just 3 points for his efforts. After a half-season stint with Pittsburgh in 05-06, the Canadian forward spent a year bouncing around a number of teams in the AHL before heading to Japan in 07-08 to play in the Asian League for a pair of seasons. Endicott then spent a year in Germany's 2nd-tier league before suiting up for Pontebba of the Italian League in 10-11, where he scored 39 points in 40 games before hanging up his skates and calling it a day. In the years following his retirement, Endicott has served as a skills coach for the University of Saskatchewan between 2012 and 2016, and as a development coach for the Saskatoon Blades in 16-17. The first North American to be picked on our list certainly had a unique playing career, that's for sure. With the 24th pick in the draft, instead of actually choosing Brad Boys, the Toronto Maple Leafs select Nathan Smith. Originally picked 23rd overall by the Vancouver Canucks, Smith took to the ice in 26 NHL games over 4 seasons, split between the Canucks, the Pittsburgh Penguins, and the Minnesota Wild, but was unable to record a single point in that span. After his final stint in the league in 09-10, the Canadian forward moved across the pond and spent a season in the German DEL before returning to North America shortly after. Smith last played professional hockey for the AHL Syracuse Crunch during the 11-12 season, where he scored 6 points in 18 games. He did serve as an alternate captain of the Crunch that year, as well as holding several other letters on his jersey throughout his career, so even though he didn't make much noise on the scoresheet, he clearly made an impact in the locker room. With the 23rd selection in the draft, instead of actually drafting Nathan Smith, the Vancouver Canucks pick TOMAS KURKA. Originally chosen 32nd overall by the Carolina Hurricanes, KURKA suited up in 17 NHL games, all with the Hurricanes over 2 seasons, and scored 5 points for his efforts. Following his final stint in the league in 03-04, KURKA spent the next few seasons bouncing around a variety of European leagues, including the Finnish Liga, the Swiss National League, and the Swedish Allsvenskan. The Czech winger then decided to return to his native Czech league in 07-08, and spent the next 5 seasons playing closer to home, before taking his talents to the Belarus League, the German DEL, the second-tier Swiss League, the Elite Ice Hockey League, and even the second-tier Russian League. KURKA then joined the third-tier German League in 16-17 and has spent the past 4 seasons with the Rostock Piranhas, finishing the recent 1920 season with 43 points in 40 games. It's not the most glamorous league by any stretch, but at least he's still a key point producer for his team. I'm sure most of the players on this list wish they could say the same. With the 22nd choice in the draft, instead of actually picking David Hale, the New Jersey Devils select Jared Orlean. Originally drafted 47th overall by the Colorado Avalanche, Orlean played in 17 NHL games, all with the Los Angeles Kings during the 02-03 season, and scored 4 points for his efforts. After leaving the league behind, the Canadian forward spent 4 seasons in the AHL, played for the University of Calgary in 07-08, didn't play at all in 08-09, before returning to the AHL in 09-10. Orlean then took his talents overseas and spent 4 seasons in Sweden and 4 seasons in Switzerland, before a brief stint in Germany during the 18-19 season. Orlean played the most recent 19-20 season with the Elite Ice Hockey League's Manchester Storm and scored 45 points in 48 games, whilst serving as an alternate captain of the team. Considering he's put up good numbers on a pretty disappointing Storm team this year, I could see Orlean sticking around in my native league for a little longer. With the 21st pick in the draft, instead of actually drafting Anton Volchenkov, the Ottawa Senators select Alexander Suglobov. Originally chosen 56th overall by the New Jersey Devils, Suglobov took to the ice in 18 NHL games over 4 seasons, split between the Devils and the Toronto Maple Leafs, scoring a single point in the process. After his final NHL stint in 06-07, Suglobov returned home to Russia and spent the next 6 seasons playing for a variety of teams in both the Russian Super League and the KHL. The Russian forward last played pro hockey for the KHL Spartak Moscow during the 12-13 season, and scored 14 points in 29 games, before hanging up his skates and calling it a career shortly after. Who says you can't go home, folks? With the 20th choice in the draft, instead of actually selecting Alexander Frolov, the Los Angeles Kings draft Chris Vanarski. Originally drafted 51st overall by the Toronto Maple Leafs, Vanarski suited up in 17 NHL games over 2 seasons with the Boston Bruins, and scored just a single point in that span. After leaving the league in 03-04, the American forward spent the next 7 seasons playing for a number of teams in a variety of North American leagues, including the AHL, the ECHL, the UHL, and the IHL. Vanarski last played for the Wheeling Nailers of the ECHL during the 10-11 season, and scored 21 points in 51 games before retiring at the end of the year. Certainly one of the shorter careers we've seen so far on this list, but not everyone gets to spend over a decade playing minor pro hockey, do they? With the 19th selection in the draft, instead of actually picking Chris Kolanos, the Phoenix Coyotes draft Martin Samuelsson. Originally chosen 27th overall by the Boston Bruins, Samuelsson played in 14 NHL games, all with the Bruins over 2 seasons, and scored a single point for his efforts. After a 6-game stint with the Bruins in 03-04, the Swedish forward spent a season in the AHL before returning home and spending the next 3 seasons split between the Swedish Hockey League and the Allsvenskan. Samuelsson last played for the Malmö Redhawks and scored 8 points in 41 games before retiring from the sport at the conclusion of the 07-08 season. I guess some stars burn brighter and quicker than others. With the 18th choice in the draft, instead of actually drafting Brooks Orpik, the Pittsburgh Penguins select Jonas Nordqvist. Originally picked 49th overall by the Chicago Blackhawks, Nordqvist took to the ice in just 3 NHL games, all with the Blackhawks, during the 06-07 season, and scored 2 points in the process. After his short stint in the league, the Swedish forward returned to his native country, where he rejoined the Swedish Hockey League for the 07-08 season. Nordqvist spent the next 7 seasons in the SHL before moving to the Austrian League and joining Klagenfurter AC for the 15-16 season. Nordqvist scored 19 points in 46 games for his new side before leaving the team and announcing his retirement in 2017, when he couldn't find a team interested in his services for the second straight year. We're not even halfway through this draft, and we're already talking about players who played single-digit figures in the NHL. What a draft! With the 17th pick in the draft, instead of actually choosing Alexei Mikhonov, the Edmonton Oilers draft Jakub Kutta. Originally selected 61st overall by the Washington Capitals, Kutta suited up in 8 NHL games over 3 seasons, all with the Capitals, and went scoreless in that span. After his final stint with Washington in 03-04, the Czech defenseman spent 2 more years in the AHL, headed overseas to spend a year in the Czech League, before joining the Russian Super League in 07-08. Kutta decided to return to his native league in 08-09 and spend almost the entirety of the next 7 seasons back home, except for a brief trip to the Finnish Liga in 13-14. Kutta then played a year in the Swedish Allsvenskan, didn't play at all in 16-17, played a 9-game stint with HC Litvinov of the Czech League in 17-18, before deciding to retire soon after. I guess you could say he checked out at the right time. Get it? Checked out? I'll see myself out. With the 16th selection in the draft, instead of actually picking Marcel Hossa, the Montreal Canadiens draft Alexei Mikhonov. Originally chosen 17th overall by the Edmonton Oilers, Mikhonov played in just a pair of NHL games with the Oilers during the 06-07 season and was unable to register a single point. After his brief stint with the Oilers, the Russian winger returned home and spent parts of 12 seasons playing in a variety of Russian leagues, including the Russian Super League, the KHL and the VHL, Russia's equivalent of the AHL. Mikhonov is still playing hockey to this day, having spent the recent 1920 season with Metalurgs Lobin of the Belarus League, where he has scored 36 points in 50 games. It's been a while since we talked about an active player who still takes to the ice today, hasn't it? Don't get used to it though. We've reached the halfway point of this draft day disaster, and if you think what we've already seen was bad enough, we've still got much, much farther to fall. With the 15th choice in the draft, instead of actually drafting Artyom KRYUKOV, the Buffalo Sabres select MATHIEU CHOUINARD. Originally picked 45th overall by the Ottawa Senators, Chouinard played in just a single NHL game with the Los Angeles Kings during the 03-04 season, stopping the 2 shots he faced to finish his NHL career with 1 win and a perfect save percentage. Every cloud has a silver lining, right guys? Following his first and only NHL game, the Canadian goaltender spent the next 2 seasons bouncing between the AHL and the ECHL, before joining the LNAH in 05-06. Chouinard played in 9 games for the LNAH's Laval Chiefs, before hanging up his skates and calling it a career just 6 years after he was drafted. Since his retirement, Chouinard has been plying his trade behind the bench, serving in a variety of roles since the 09-10 season, such as assistant coach, head coach, goaltending coach and technical director for a number of teams in a number of leagues, with his most recent job being the head coach of the QCHL Saint Laurent Patriots during the 1920 season. Not many players on this list have already produced a 10-year coaching career just 20 years after being drafted, but Chouinard is certainly one of them. With the 14th pick in the draft, instead of actually choosing VACLAV NEDOROST, the Colorado Avalanche select Matt DEMARCHI. Originally drafted 57th overall by the New Jersey Devils, DEMARCHI is officially the first player on this list to have never played a single game in the NHL. Instead, the Italian-American defenseman played 3 years in the NCAA at the University of Minnesota, then 4 years in the AHL, where he scored 36 points in 200 games, before heading to the Italian League for the 07-08 season. DEMARCHI spent 5 of his next 6 seasons in Italy, the other year being a season in the Swedish Allsvenskan, and played his last pro hockey with Milano Rossoblu during the 12-13 season, where he scored 24 points in 43 games. It took us just over half the draft, but we finally reached the 0 NHL games played group. Don't worry folks, we have plenty more of these skaters to come. With the 13th selection in the draft, instead of actually picking Ron Hainsey, the Montreal Canadiens draft Gerard Decaire. Originally picked 48th overall by the Buffalo Sabres, Decaire also never played a single NHL game, instead playing in 140 AHL games over 3 seasons and scoring 24 points. After his final stint in the minors during the 05-06 season, the Canadian defenseman would briefly join the ECHL before calling it a day and leaving the sport behind. However, Decaire would re-emerge 4 years later during the 09-10 season in the NPHL Senior League, then call it a day again, then rejoin the NPHL in 12-13 and play 3 seasons with the Fort St. John Flyers before finally hanging up his skates for good. Decaire has since taken his talents behind the bench, serving as the head coach for NEBC for the recent 1920 season. What's even more interesting than this rollercoaster ride of a career is how Decaire was also selected in the 5th round of the 2002 draft by the Tampa Bay Lightning. So not only did Decaire fail to live up to his potential for one franchise, he did it for another one too. Ouch. With the 12th choice in the draft, instead of actually drafting Alexei Smirnov, the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim pick LIBOR USTRNUL. Originally selected 42nd overall by the Atlanta Thrashers, rest in peace Thrashers, USTRNUL was never able to make it to the NHL, instead suiting up in 114 AHL games over 4 seasons, where he scored just 6 points. The Czech defenseman then left the minors and returned home to the Czech League for the 05-06 season, spent his next 3 seasons there, along with a brief stint in the Finnish Liga, didn't play at all during the 08-09 season, before joining the CHL's Rapid City Rush for the 09-10 season. USTRNUL would score 2 points in 21 games with his new team, before retiring from the sport shortly after. The most fascinating thing about USTRNUL's career in my eyes is how he scored exactly 2 points in almost every single season since he turned pro. Hey, at least he was consistent. With the 11th pick in the draft, instead of actually choosing Pavel Vorobyov, the Chicago Blackhawks select Daniel Whiting. Originally drafted 36th overall by the Nashville Predators, Whiting was never able to make it to the NHL, suiting up in just 3 AHL games where he was unable to score even a single point. Following his brief stint in the minors during the 06-07 season, the Swedish forward has gone on to play for a variety of teams in a variety of leagues around Europe, including the Swedish Hockey League, the Swiss National League, the Finnish Liga, and the German DEL. Whiting most recently played for Djurgården IF of the SHL during the past 1920 season, after joining the team from Luleå HF, where he scored a single point in 23 games. How long has it been since we last saw a player on this list that's still active today? I get the draft was almost 20 years ago, but still. We've reached the 10 worst players of this draft day disaster. We are really scraping the bottom of the barrel at this point, folks, so do make sure you're ready. With the 10th selection in the draft, instead of actually drafting Mikhail Yakubov, the Chicago Blackhawks pick Ilya Nikulin. Originally chosen 31st overall by the Atlanta Thrashers, Nikulin is the first player on this list to have never played in either the NHL or the AHL. Instead, the Russian defenseman decided to spend his entire career in his homeland, where he spent 19 years suiting up in either the Russian Super League or the KHL, scoring 89 points in 393 RSL games and 309 points in 562 KHL games. Nikulin last played for the KHL's Dynamo Moscow during the 18-19 season, where he served as the team's captain and scored 24 points in 61 games, before seemingly calling it a day on his career. Considering the guy won 2 RSL championships, 2 Gagarin Cups, and was a 7-time All-Star, some of you might think that Nikulin should be earlier on this list, or even removed from it entirely. Well, unfortunately, none of his individual or team success came as a member of the Thrashers organisation, meaning he was a bust for them, and it means he sits right where he should be. With the 9th choice in the draft, instead of actually drafting BRENT KRAHN, the Calgary Flames pick TERO MAATTA. Originally selected 41st overall by the San Jose Sharks, MAATTA also never played a single game in North America, instead spending his entire career in Europe, predominantly in the Finnish Liga, where he scored 87 points in 452 Liga games. The Finnish defenseman last played for Liga side Assat during the 10-11 season, where he scored a single point in 20 games before hanging up his skates and retiring. Since then, MAATTA has taken his talents behind the bench, serving as either an assistant coach or a head coach for a number of different teams since the 12-13 season. The Finn is set to coach Jokerit's under-20 side for the upcoming 2021 season, a job he has served for the past 2 years. Sounds like MAATTA has made quite a career for himself back home, both on and off the ice. He did nothing for the team that drafted him though, so on the list he goes. With the 8th pick in the draft, instead of actually choosing Nikita Alexeyev, the Tampa Bay Lightning select Teemu Laine. Originally drafted 39th overall by the New Jersey Devils, Laine never brought his talents over to North America, instead spending 7 years in the Finnish Liga, where he scored 142 points in 399 games, as well as 3 seasons in the Swedish Hockey League and 3 in the KHL, before returning to the SHL for the 14-15 season. The Finnish forward last played for the SHL's HV71 during the 16-17 season, and scored 3 points in 15 games before calling it a day on his career. Sure, he may have won a Liga championship and a couple of SHL championships, but he didn't play a single game for either the Lightning or their AHL affiliate, so he sits high on this list. Perfectly balanced as all things should be. With the 7th selection in the draft, instead of actually drafting Lars Jonsson, keep this name in mind folks, the Boston Bruins pick Sergei Soin. Originally chosen 50th overall by the Colorado Avalanche, Soin never suited up for either the Avalanche or their minor league affiliate, instead choosing to stay home in Russia and play 18 seasons split between the Russian Super League and the KHL, scoring 103 points in 329 RSL games, as well as 130 points in 383 KHL games. The Russian forward last played for the KHL's Lada Togliatti during the 17-18 season, where he served as an alternate captain of the team and scored 5 points in 26 games, before retiring from pro hockey shortly after. If you thought that we had already seen enough Russian players who never made it to the NHL, I hate to disappoint you folks, but the next few picks are more of the same. Don't blame me, blame the teams that picked all these guys so high in the draft, alright? With the 6th choice in the draft, instead of actually drafting Scott Hartnell, the Nashville Predators pick RUSLAN ZAINULLIN. Originally selected 34th overall by the Tampa Bay Lightning, ZAINULLIN also never took to the ice in either the NHL or the AHL, spending his entire career in his native Russia instead, where he scored 68 points in 301 RSL games, as well as 63 points in 218 KHL games. The Russian forward last played for THK Tver of the VHL during the 15-16 season, and scored 2 points in 14 games before hanging up his skates soon after. Not a bad career by any stretch, but no NHL games means a high spot on this list. I don't just enforce the rules, I make them too. With the 5th overall pick in the draft, instead of actually choosing Raffi Torres, the New York Islanders select Alexander Tatarinov. Originally drafted 53rd overall by the Phoenix Coyotes, Tatarinov never suited up for any North American team, instead following a similar path to the previous few players on this list by spending his entire career in Russia, scoring 37 points in 193 RSL games, as well as 30 points in 142 KHL games. The Russian winger left the KHL behind following a brief 2-game stint in 11-12, spent a year in the VHL, before heading to the Kazakhstan League in 13-14. Tatarinov then spent his final 4 seasons with HK Almaty and scored 13 points in 53 games during the 16-17 season before calling it a day on his career shortly after. Another top 10 spot, another Russian who never played in North America. That's the way the cookie crumbles. With the 4th overall selection in the draft, instead of actually drafting Rostislav Klesla, the Columbus Blue Jackets pick, ARTYOM KRYUKOV. Originally chosen 15th overall by the Buffalo Sabres, KRYUKOV also never played in either the NHL or the AHL, spending his entire pro career in his homeland instead, where he scored 47 points in 230 RSL games, as well as 53 points in 216 KHL games. The Russian forward last played for Severstal Sherepovets during the 15-16 season, and scored 2 points in 16 games, before hanging up his skates and retiring from the sport. Just one more Russian to go, hang in there just a little bit longer, folks. With the 3rd overall choice in the draft, instead of actually drafting Marian Gaborik, the Minnesota Wild pick, Vladimir SAPOZHNIKOV. Originally drafted 58th overall by the Florida Panthers, SAPOZHNIKOV barely played any pro hockey, either in North America or overseas, taking to the ice in just 4 AHL games during the 02-03 season, where he went scoreless in that span. After returning home to Russia following his 4-game stint, the Russian defenseman didn't play at all during the 03-04 season, before joining UNOST Minsk of the Belarus League for the 04-05 season. SAPOZHNIKOV went scoreless in 2 games with his new side, before he decided to retire from professional hockey just 4 years after he was drafted. So after the Panthers used a 2nd round pick to draft him, Vladimir SAPOZHNIKOV played just 21 games as a pro and only scored a pair of points. Yikes. Penultimately, with the 2nd overall pick in the draft, instead of actually choosing Dany Heatley, the Atlanta Thrashers select BRENT KRAHN. Originally picked 9th overall by the Calgary Flames, KRAHN did make an appearance in the NHL, but just once with the Dallas Stars during the 08-09 season. In that single game, the Canadian goaltender played just 20 minutes of game time and allowed 3 goals on 9 shots for a .667 save percentage in a 6-2 loss to the Chicago Blackhawks. Following his debut, KRAHN spent the rest of the 08-09 season split between the AHL and the ECHL, and then played another 2 seasons in the AHL. After a 12-game stint with the Texas Stars during the 10-11 season, where he posted a 3.2 goals against average and a .895 save percentage, KRAHN decided to call it a day on his career and retire. The 9th overall draft pick played just 1 period between the pipes of an NHL game. Yep, he's in the right spot, folks. And finally, last and most certainly least, with the 1st overall pick in this draft day disaster, instead of actually drafting Rick DiPietro, the New York Islanders select LARS JONSSON. The epitome of how a top 10 pick can go horribly wrong, LARS JONSSON is officially crowned the worst player of this draft day disaster. Originally drafted 7th overall by the Boston Bruins, JONSSON was able to take to the ice in the NHL, but in just 8 games, all with the Philadelphia Flyers during the 06-07 season, where he scored just 2 points for his efforts. Well, at least he scored a few points, right guys? Following his brief stint in the league, the Swedish defenseman played another year in the AHL before heading back home to suit up in the Swedish Hockey League for the 08-09 season. JONSSON then spent the next 5 seasons with Brynäs IF, serving as the alternate captain for 3 of those seasons, and last playing for the team during the 12-13 season, where he went scoreless in 6 games, before retiring from pro hockey. So let me get this straight. The 7th overall pick in the draft, the player considered to be the 7th best player of his entire age group from across the globe, played just 8 NHL games. What's worse is that he didn't even play those 8 games with the franchise that drafted him in the first place. If that's not deserving of the top spot on this list, I don't know what is. I would say that I hope JONSSON kept the puck that he used to score his first NHL goal, but he didn't even score a goal, so how could he? He hasn't got one. And that's how you turn the 2000 NHL Entry Draft into a draft day disaster. What do you guys think about this redraft? Is it good, bad, or would you have ranked the players slightly differently? Also, is there another draft that you would like me to turn upside down? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear what you guys think. But thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you have enjoyed. Please feel free to like, subscribe, share, or watch some of my other videos. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye. A big thank you to Antti Hänninen, Chris Gadsby, Connor B, Paul Mallia, Jordan Whitehead, and Martin Tolness, as well as a huge thank you to Max Artis for helping support this video via Patreon. If you too want to help support the channel a little bit further and get a shout out at the end of every future video, make sure you head over to patreon.com/oddmanrush and become a patron today.